In the glittering world of British royalty, where every gesture carries weight and every accessory tells a story, one piece of jewelry would ignite a scandal that no one saw coming. The Cambridge lovers' not tiara wasn't the only precious heirloom that caught the world's attention that evening. Hidden beneath the flash of cameras and polite applause at the most prestigious charity gala of the year, a simple yet profound act would reveal the true dynamics of power, loyalty, and family bonds within House of Windsor. What started as an elegant evening celebrating humanitarian efforts would transform into a moment that royal watchers would dissect for years to come. The crowd expected speeches, donations, and the usual royal charm. Instead, they witnessed something far more revealing about the people behind the crowns. Sometimes the most powerful statements are made not through words, but through the quiet rebellion of wearing someone else's jewelry. This is the story of how one necklace, one decision, and one unexpected reaction changed everything the public thought they knew about the royal family's most guarded relationships. The morning of the Royal Children's Foundation Gala dawned crisp and clear across London, with autumn sunlight streaming through the tall windows of Clarence House. Queen Camilla stood before her ornate dressing table, surrounded by an array of jewelry boxes that held decades of royal history within their velvet-lined compartments. Each piece told a story, each gem carried the weight of tradition, and each choice she made would be scrutinized by millions around the world. Her personal dresser, Margaret, had laid out several options for the evening's event. The gala was one of the most important charity events of the year, bringing together members of the royal family, celebrities, politicians, and philanthropists to raise funds for children in need. As queen consort, Camilla's appearance would be photographed from every angle, analyzed by fashion experts, and discussed across social media platforms before the evening was even over. "Your Majesty, I've selected the sapphire parure that belonged to Queen Mary," Margaret suggested, gesturing toward a magnificent set that sparkled under the morning light. "It would complement the navy gown beautifully." Camilla nodded absently, her fingers trailing over various pieces. The weight of choosing the right jewelry for royal events had never quite become second nature to her, despite years of practice. Unlike those born into the royal family, she still felt the occasional flutter of uncertainty about protocol and tradition. Every choice mattered, every detail was significant, and the wrong selection could spark weeks of negative press coverage. As she examined the options before her, her gaze fell upon a particular necklace nestled in a smaller box that Margaret had placed slightly to the side. It was elegant, but not ostentatious, featuring a delicate chain of diamonds and pearls arranged in a classic design. The piece had a timeless quality that seemed to capture light and hold it, creating a gentle luminescence that drew the eye without overwhelming it. "What about this one?" Camilla asked, lifting the necklace carefully. The weight felt perfect in her hands, substantial enough to convey importance, but not so heavy as to feel burdensome during a long evening of socializing and speeches. Margaret's expression shifted slightly, a barely perceptible hesitation crossing her features. "That particular piece, Your Majesty, it belongs to the Princess of Wales." It was among the items she selected from Queen Elizabeth's collection after the mourning period ended. The revelation hung in the air between them. Camilla continued to examine the necklace, turning it slowly in the light. She had always admired Kate's impeccable taste in jewelry selection. The younger woman had a natural instinct for choosing pieces that enhanced rather than competed with her outfits, creating looks that were both regal and approachable. "It's quite beautiful," Camilla murmured, almost to herself. "The craftsmanship is exquisite." Margaret cleared her throat delicately. "Shall I contact the Princess of Wales's office to inquire about borrowing it for this evening?" Though given the short notice. "No," Camilla said quietly, still holding the necklace. "That won't be necessary." The dresser waited for further instruction, but Camilla seemed lost in thought. The morning light caught the diamonds in the necklace, sending tiny rainbows across the walls of the dressing room. There was something about the piece that spoke to her, something beyond its obvious beauty and craftsmanship. Meanwhile, across London at Kensington Palace, The Princess of Wales was dealing with her own preparations for the evening. Kate sat in her private study, reviewing the guest list and her speaking notes for the gala. As patron of several children's charities, she took her role in these events seriously, understanding that her presence could significantly impact fundraising efforts and public awareness. Her lady-in-waiting, Sophie, entered with a garment bag containing Kate's gown for the evening, a stunning emerald green creation that had been custom designed for the occasion. The color was chosen specifically to complement a particular set of emerald earrings that had once belonged to Princess Diana, creating a subtle but meaningful tribute to William's mother. The jewelers have cleaned and reset the emerald earrings as requested, Sophie informed her. They'll arrive this afternoon along with a matching bracelet. Kate nodded, making a note in her planner. Perfect. And my grandmother's pearl necklace. Sophie paused, consulting her own notes. I'm afraid there seems to be some confusion about that piece, Your Highness. According to the jewelry inventory, it was last signed out to Clarence House 3 days ago. Clarence House. Kate looked up from her papers, a slight frown creasing her brow. Are you certain? I've double-checked with the palace jewelry coordinator. The necklace was requested for a viewing, though no specific event was mentioned. Kate felt a small flutter of concern. The necklace in question held particular sentimental value for her. It had been a gift from Queen Elizabeth during her first year of marriage to William, presented privately during a small family gathering. The Queen had told her that the piece would help her feel connected to the long line of remarkable women who had served the monarchy, and Kate had treasured both the jewelry and the sentiment behind it. Perhaps it was simply for cataloging purposes, Sophie suggested diplomatically. I could make inquiries if you'd like. Kate considered this for a moment. The royal household ran on strict protocols regarding jewelry and other precious items, but occasionally pieces were moved between residences for various reasons. Still, she had specifically planned to wear that necklace this evening, both for its beauty and its personal significance. Let's wait until this afternoon, Kate decided. If it hasn't been returned by then, we'll make discreet inquiries. Back at Clarence House, Camilla was now fully dressed for the gala, standing before a full-length mirror as Margaret made final adjustments to her gown. The navy dress was a masterpiece of understated elegance, its clean lines and classic silhouette perfectly suited to her role and personal style. But the necklace she wore drew the eye immediately. The diamond and pearl creation rested perfectly against her décolletage, its design somehow managing to be both traditional and contemporary. The way it caught the light seemed to add an extra dimension to her entire appearance, elevating the ensemble from simply formal to genuinely stunning. Your Majesty looks radiant, Margaret commented, stepping back to assess the overall effect. Camilla turned slightly, watching how the necklace moved with her. There was something about wearing it that made her feel more confident, more certain of her place in the complex hierarchy of royal life. Perhaps it was the craftsmanship, or perhaps it was something more intangible about the piece itself. Has His Majesty seen the final look? She asked. King Charles is still in meetings with his private secretary, but he's expected to join you in the drawing room at 6 o'clock before departure. Camilla nodded, taking one final look in the mirror. The woman looking back at her appeared every inch the queen consort, poised and elegant, ready to fulfill her duties at one of the year's most important charitable events. The necklace seemed to anchor the entire look, providing just the right touch of glamour without overshadowing the event's serious purpose. As she made her way downstairs, Camilla passed through corridors lined with portraits of previous queens and consorts. Each woman had faced her own challenges in this role, navigating the delicate balance between personal desires and public duty. Tonight felt like another small test in that ongoing journey. The Bentley was already waiting in the courtyard when she reached the main entrance. The evening was clear and cool, perfect weather for the gala. As she settled into the luxurious interior of the car, Camilla touched the necklace absently, feeling the smooth pearls and faceted diamonds beneath her fingertips. She couldn't quite explain why she had chosen this particular piece over the other magnificent options available to her. There had been something almost magnetic about it, something that seemed to call to her despite its connection to Kate. Or perhaps because of that connection. The relationship between Camilla and Kate had always been cordial, but somewhat distant. They moved in overlapping but distinct circles within the royal family, each focused on their own responsibilities and charitable interests. There had never been any conflict between them, but neither had there been the warm friendship that some royal watchers liked to imagine. As the car made its way through London traffic toward the gala venue, Camilla found herself wondering what Kate would think when she saw the necklace. Would she recognize it immediately? Would she be offended that it had been borrowed without permission? Or would she understand it as simply another instance of the practical sharing that occurred within royal households? The venue for the gala was the Natural History Museum, its Victorian architecture providing a suitably grand backdrop for the evening's events. As they approached, Camilla could see the red carpet already lined with photographers and reporters, their cameras ready to capture every detail of every arrival. The sight never failed to create a small spike of adrenaline, even after years of such events. King Charles was waiting for her in the museum's main entrance, resplendent in his evening wear and looking every inch the monarch. His eyes immediately went to her necklace when she approached, and she saw a flicker of something cross his expression, though it was gone too quickly to interpret. "You look magnificent, darling," he said, offering his arm as they prepared to make their entrance. "Thank you," she replied, falling in a step beside him as they approached the main hall where the gala was being held. The museum had been transformed for the evening, its soaring ceilings draped with elegant fabric, and its halls filled with round tables set for dinner. The guest list included some of the most prominent names in British society, all gathered to support children's charities through their donations and attendance. As they entered the main reception area, Camilla immediately began the familiar routine of meeting and greeting guests. Each conversation required just the right balance of warmth and formality, genuine interest in the work being supported, and careful attention to protocol regarding who should be acknowledged first and how much time to spend with each group. The necklace seemed to be attracting attention. She noticed several guests' eyes drawn to it during conversations, and more than one person complimented her on the choice. Each comment reinforced her feeling that she had selected well, that the piece was perfectly suited to both the occasion and her role. About an hour into the reception, she spotted William and Kate making their entrance across the room. Kate looked stunning in her emerald gown, her bearing graceful and confident as she navigated the crowd. Camilla watched as the younger woman's gaze swept the room, taking in the attendees and the venue's magnificent decoration. Their eyes met across the space, and Kate smiled politely before being drawn into conversation with a group of charity representatives. But Camilla had noticed something in that brief moment of eye contact, a slight pause as Kate's gaze had taken her appearance, lingering for just a fraction of a second on the necklace. Now the evening would truly begin, with all its complex undercurrents of family dynamics, public scrutiny, and personal relationships playing out under the bright lights and watchful cameras of one of the year's most important royal events. The recognition was instantaneous and unmistakable. Kate's breath caught almost imperceptibly as her eyes registered the familiar shimmer of diamonds and pearls adorning Camilla's neck. The necklace that held such personal significance, the piece she had planned to wear this very evening, was now gracing the queen consort across the crowded reception hall. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The chatter of conversations, the clink of champagne glasses, the soft music from the string quartet, all faded into background noise as Kate processed what she was seeing. The necklace caught the museum's dramatic lighting perfectly, creating the same luminous effect that had first drawn her to the piece years ago when Queen Elizabeth had presented it to her. "Darling, are you all right?" William's voice broke through her momentary reverie. He had noticed her sudden stillness, the way her smile had frozen for just an instant. "Of course," Kate replied smoothly, years of royal training allowing her to recover her composure without missing a beat. "Just admiring the decorations." They've done a wonderful job with the lighting. But even as she resumed her conversations with guests, part of her mind remained focused on the situation unfolding across the room. She watched as Camilla moved gracefully from group to group, the controversial necklace drawing compliments and admiring glances from everyone she encountered. Each positive comment about the piece felt like a small sting, knowing that it should have been her wearing it, her receiving those compliments. Lady Sarah Pemberton, a prominent philanthropist and longtime family friend, approached Kate with enthusiasm. "Catherine, you look absolutely radiant this evening. That emerald green is stunning on you." "Thank you so much, Sarah." "You're very kind," Kate responded warmly, though her attention was partially divided. "I was just speaking with Queen Camilla about her exquisite necklace. Such a beautiful choice for this evening. She mentioned it has quite a history within the family." Kate's smile remained perfectly in place, but internally she felt a sharp pang of irritation. Not only was Camilla wearing her necklace without permission, but she was also discussing its history as if it were her own to share. The presumption felt particularly galling given the personal significance the piece held for her. "Family jewelry often does have interesting stories," Kate replied diplomatically, choosing her words carefully to avoid revealing her true feelings about the situation. Meanwhile, Camilla was indeed discussing the necklace with several guests, though her comments were more general than specific. She had always been skilled at navigating conversations about royal jewelry, understanding that people were fascinated by the history and provenance of such pieces while being careful not to reveal too much about the private aspects of royal life. "It's a particularly elegant example of 20th century craftsmanship," she was saying to Lord and Lady Fairfax, longtime supporters of children's charities. "The way the diamonds and pearls work together creates such a lovely effect." Indeed, Lady Fairfax agreed enthusiastically. "It has such a timeless quality. One could imagine it being just as beautiful 50 years from now." Charles, standing nearby as he spoke with a group of business leaders about their charitable contributions, occasionally glanced toward his wife during these exchanges. He had recognized the necklace immediately when she had appeared wearing it, and while he had said nothing at the time, he was acutely aware of the potential complications such a choice might create. As someone who had spent his entire life navigating the intricate protocols and relationships within the royal family, Charles understood that jewelry choices were rarely simple matters. Each piece carried history, sentiment, and often complex ownership arrangements that had developed over decades or even generations. The fact that this particular necklace belonged to Kate made Camilla's decision to wear it tonight a delicate situation that would require careful handling. The dinner portion of the evening began with guests moving from the reception area into the main dining hall. The museum's whale skeleton, suspended dramatically overhead, created a unique and impressive backdrop for the formal meal. Kate found herself seated at a table with several charity directors and their major donors, while Camilla was positioned at the high table with Charles and other senior royals. From her position, Kate had a clear view of the high table, which meant she also had frequent glimpses of her necklace throughout the meal. Each time the light caught the diamonds, she felt a fresh wave of frustration. The piece looked beautiful, she had to admit, but that only made the situation more difficult to bear. Sophie, her lady-in-waiting, had discreetly taken a seat at a nearby table and caught Kate's eye during the first course. The slight questioning look on Sophie's face suggested that she too had noticed the necklace situation and was awaiting guidance on how to proceed. Kate gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head, indicating that nothing should be said or done during the event itself. The dinner conversation at Kate's table focused on the various children's charities being supported by the evening's fundraising efforts. She participated actively, discussing her own patronages and sharing insights from her recent visits to various programs. Her genuine passion for the cause helped her maintain focus despite the ongoing distraction of the necklace situation. During the second course, she noticed several society photographers moving around the dining hall, capturing candid moments of the evening. Each time a camera was pointed toward the high table, She found herself wondering how the images would look in tomorrow's newspapers, whether anyone would recognize the necklace and understand its significance. The irony was not lost on her that the piece had been a symbol of belonging when Queen Elizabeth had first given it to her. The late queen had spoken about how jewelry could help connect the women of the royal family across generations, creating bonds of tradition and shared experience. Now, that same piece seemed to be creating division rather than unity. As the main course was being served, William leaned over to speak quietly in her ear. "The necklace issue," he murmured, having clearly pieced together the source of her distraction. Kate nodded almost imperceptibly, not trusting herself to speak about it, even in whispers while surrounded by guests and photographers. "We'll handle it properly after the event," William assured her, his voice carrying the quiet authority that came with his position. As second in line to the throne, he was well-versed in managing family diplomatic situations, and Kate felt some of her tension ease knowing that he understood and would help address the matter appropriately. The evening's entertainment began with the formal speeches portion of the program. Charles rose first to address the gathered guests, his words focusing on the importance of supporting vulnerable children and the significant impact that collective charitable efforts could have on young lives. His speech was well received, with warm applause following his concluding remarks. Next came presentations from several of the charity directors, each highlighting specific programs and sharing stories of children who had been helped by previous fundraising efforts. These personal accounts were always the most moving part of such events, reminding everyone present why they had gathered and what their donations would accomplish. When it was Kate's turn to speak, she rose gracefully and moved to the podium. Her remarks had been carefully prepared to highlight her own experiences visiting children's programs and to encourage continued support for the causes being celebrated. As she spoke, she could see Camilla listening attentively from the high table, the disputed necklace catching the light each time she moved. "The children we support through these programs represent our future," Kate said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "When we invest in their well-being, their education, their dreams, we invest in the kind of world we want to leave behind. Every child deserves the chance to reach their full potential, regardless of the circumstances of their birth." The words carried special resonance, given her own position as mother to future monarchs, and the applause that followed was particularly enthusiastic. As she returned to her seat, Kate noticed that Camilla was among those applauding most warmly, and their eyes met briefly across the room. For just a moment, she thought she detected something in Camilla's expression that might have been understanding or perhaps even regret. The auction portion of the evening began shortly after the speeches concluded. Various items donated by supporters were presented for bidding, with all proceeds going to the children's charities. The lots included everything from luxury vacation packages to private dinners with celebrities, art pieces, and unique experiences that money typically couldn't buy. One item that drew particular attention was a private tour of Buckingham Palace followed by afternoon tea, donated by Charles himself. The bidding for this experience was spirited, eventually reaching a sum that drew gasps and applause from the audience. As the winning bidder was announced, Kate couldn't help but notice how the camera flashes illuminated Camilla's necklace each time she joined in the applause. During a brief intermission before the evening's final activities, guests mingled once again, moving between the dining areas and back into the reception spaces. This more casual portion of the evening allowed for longer conversations and more personal interactions between the royals and the supporters of the various charities. Kate found herself approached by several guests who wanted to discuss her recent work with early childhood development programs. These conversations were always energizing for her, as they allowed her to speak in detail about issues she cared deeply about, and to hear firsthand accounts from people working directly with families and children. "Your Royal Highness," said Dr. Margaret Shun, director of one of the featured charities, "your visit to our Birmingham Center last month made such an impact on our staff and families. We're still receiving positive feedback from parents who met you that day." "I'm so pleased to hear that," Kate replied genuinely. The work you're doing there with early intervention programs is exactly the kind of evidence-based approach that can transform outcomes for children and families. As they continued their conversation, Kate became aware that Camilla was approaching their group, moving through the crowd with her characteristic grace and engaging warmth. The prospect of a face-to-face interaction while the necklace situation remained unresolved created a fresh wave of tension. "Catherine, Dr. Chun," Camilla said as she joined their circle, "I couldn't help but overhear your discussion about the Birmingham programs. Such important work." "Indeed, Your Majesty," Dr. Chun replied. "We were just discussing how effective early intervention can be in supporting families facing challenges." The three women continued their conversation about children's services, but underneath the polite surface, Kate was acutely aware of the necklace that sparkled between them. Camilla seemed comfortable and natural, showing no signs of awareness that anything was amiss. This only added to Kate's frustration, as it suggested that the borrowing of the necklace had been done without any thought to its personal significance or the protocol breach involved. When a photographer approached to capture the moment of a senior royals discussing charitable work, both women smiled graciously for the camera. The resulting images would show two elegant women united in their support for children's causes, with no hint of the underlying tension that existed between them. But Kate knew that every photograph featuring Camilla and her necklace would serve as a permanent reminder of this evening's diplomatic challenge. The breaking point came during what should have been one of the evening's most triumphant moments. The auction had concluded successfully, raising significantly more than the organizers had projected for the children's charities. Guests were gathered in small groups throughout the museum's grand halls, sharing final conversations and making arrangements for future charitable collaborations. Kate had just finished a particularly meaningful discussion with a foster care advocate when she noticed Camilla holding court near the main staircase, surrounded by a group of fashion journalists and society columnists. The conversation appeared to be focused entirely on Camilla's jewelry choices for the evening, with particular attention being paid to the disputed necklace. "The craftsmanship really is exceptional," Camilla was saying to Victoria Hartwell, fashion director of one of London's premier lifestyle magazines. "You can see how each element has been carefully considered to create the overall effect." "Absolutely stunning," Victoria replied, leaning in for a closer look. "The way the pearls and diamonds complement each other is masterful. Is this a piece with particular historical significance?" Kate felt her composure finally beginning to crack as she overheard Camilla's response. "It has been in the family collection for some time. These pieces often carry such wonderful stories across the generations." The careful ambiguity of the answer, while technically truthful, felt like a deliberate misrepresentation to Kate. The necklace did indeed carry stories, but they were her stories, her memories of receiving it from Queen Elizabeth, her associations with the special occasions on which she had worn it. To hear those connections being appropriated, even indirectly, was more than she could bear. William appeared at her side, clearly having noticed her distress despite her efforts to maintain her public composure. "Perhaps we should make our departure," he suggested quietly. "It's been a long evening." But before Kate could respond, the situation escalated dramatically. Charles, who had been observing the jewelry discussion from a short distance away, suddenly stepped forward with an expression that made everyone in the immediate vicinity fall silent. "Camilla," he said, his voice carrying a tone that few people had ever heard from the typically diplomatic monarch, "I believe we need to address something." The fashion journalists sensed immediately that they were witnessing something significant. Cameras began appearing, though palace protection officers quickly moved to create a subtle barrier between the royal family members and the press. Still, the tension was palpable throughout the immediate area. Camilla looked up with surprise at Charles's serious tone. "Whatever do you mean, darling?" "The necklace you're wearing belongs to Catherine," Charles said clearly, his words carrying across the space with unmistakable authority. "It was a personal gift to her from my mother, and it should have been returned to her collection days ago." A hush fell over the surrounding area as the implications of Charles's statement became clear. This was not merely a discussion about jewelry borrowing or sharing within the family. This was the king publicly correcting his wife's behavior in front of journalists, photographers, and some of the most influential people in British society. Camilla's face flushed visibly as she realized the gravity of the situation. Her hand instinctively moved to touch the necklace, as if she had forgotten she was wearing it. "Charles, surely this can be discussed privately." "It should have been discussed privately before you chose to wear it tonight," Charles replied, his voice remaining firm but controlled. "Catherine has been extremely gracious about this situation throughout the evening, but enough is enough." Kate felt a mixture of vindication and mortification. While she was grateful that Charles was addressing the situation, having it unfold so publicly was far from ideal. The last thing any of them needed was for family tensions to become tabloid headlines. Lady Pemberton and several other guests began to discreetly move away from the immediate area, clearly recognizing that they were witnessing something that would be better forgotten than discussed later. The protection officers continued their careful work of managing the scene, ensuring that while some people could overhear what was happening, no unauthorized photographs or recordings were being made. "Your Majesty," Kate interjected, stepping forward to try to defuse the situation, "perhaps we could resolve this matter quietly." But Charles was not finished. The years of watching his wife navigate the complex dynamics of royal life, the careful balance he had tried to maintain between supporting her and honoring the protocols that govern their family, seemed to have reached a tipping point. "This is not simply about one piece of jewelry," he continued, his gaze moving between Camilla and Kate. "This is about respect, about understanding one's place within our family, and about honoring the relationships that make our institution work." Camilla's composure finally began to crack. "I never intended any disrespect. I simply thought it was beautiful and appropriate for the evening." "But you knew it belonged to Catherine," Charles pressed. "You knew it had personal significance to her. And you chose to wear it anyway, without permission, without discussion, without any consideration for how that choice might affect others." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the background music seemed to have stopped as staff members throughout the museum became aware that something unprecedented was happening near the main staircase. William stepped closer to Kate, providing a subtle show of support while also positioning himself to intervene if the situation escalated further. His expression was carefully neutral, but those who knew him well could see the tension in his jaw and the protective way he had angled himself slightly in front of his wife. "I think perhaps we should all take a moment to collect ourselves," William suggested diplomatically, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations. But Charles was not ready to let the matter drop. "No, William, this has been building for far too long. The constant small presumptions, the gradual overstepping of boundaries, the assumption that belonging to this family means having access to everything within it without regard for the feelings or rights of others." It was clear that Charles was addressing issues that went far beyond the necklace incident. Years of watching his wife struggle to find her place within the royal hierarchy, years of mediating between her desires and the expectations of other family members, years of trying to balance his love for her with his responsibilities as monarch, all seemed to be coming to the surface in this very public moment. Camilla looked around the space, becoming fully aware for the first time of how many people were witnessing this confrontation. Her usual confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by a vulnerability that was rarely seen in public. The woman who had weathered decades of public criticism and family tensions appeared genuinely shaken by her husband's unprecedented public rebuke. "Charles, please," she said quietly, her voice barely carrying beyond their immediate circle. "Not here. Not like this." "Then where, Camilla?" Charles replied, his tone softening slightly, but remaining firm. "In private, where these issues continue to fester. In meetings with staff where nothing really gets resolved? When should we address the fact that respect and consideration seem to be one-sided in this family?" Kate felt a complex mix of emotions as she watched the exchange. Part of her was gratified to see Charles defending her position so forcefully. She had indeed been gracious throughout the evening, maintaining her composure and continuing to fulfill her duties despite the personal affront. But another part of her was uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation and worried about the long-term implications for family relationships. The museum's events coordinator appeared at the edge of the group, clearly uncertain about whether to intervene. The evening was supposed to conclude with informal mingling and departures, not with a royal family confrontation that threatened to overshadow all the positive work that had been accomplished for the children's charities. Victoria Hartwell, the fashion journalist who had been admiring the necklace just minutes earlier, stood frozen nearby with her notebook, clearly understanding that she was witnessing something that could either be the story of a year or something that would need to be completely forgotten depending on how palace communications handled the aftermath. "Perhaps," Kate said, finding her voice again, "we could arrange for the necklace to be returned to my collection tomorrow and consider this matter closed." Her offer was diplomatic and face-saving, providing Camilla with a graceful exit from the confrontation while also establishing clearly that the jewelry did indeed belong to her. It was exactly the sort of solution that royal families typically employed to handle private disputes without creating lasting damage to relationships or public perceptions. But Charles was not ready to accept such an easy resolution. "Catherine, your grace in this situation has been remarkable, but it should not have been necessary. You should not have had to spend this entire evening watching someone else wear your personal jewelry while pretending that everything was perfectly normal." The king's words carried the weight of months, or perhaps years of similar frustrations. It was becoming clear that this was not an isolated incident, but rather the culmination of a pattern of behavior that had been building tension within the family. Camilla finally removed the necklace with shaking hands, the diamonds and pearls catching the light one final time as she lifted the piece over her head. Her careful hairstyle was slightly disturbed by the action, adding to the overall impression of a woman whose composure had been completely shattered. "Here," she said, holding the necklace toward Kate. "I truly never meant any harm." Kate accepted the jewelry gracefully, her fingers closing around the familiar weight of the piece that held so much personal significance. "Thank you," she said simply, choosing not to elaborate on the situation further. The transfer of the necklace marked a turning point in the confrontation, but the tensions that had been revealed were far from resolved. Charles continued to regard his wife with an expression of disappointment that spoke to deeper issues than anyone present had previously understood. "We will discuss this further at home," he said to Camilla, his tone indicating that the public portion of this conversation was concluded, but that private discussions would certainly follow. As the immediate crisis passed, staff members throughout the museum began the delicate work of managing the aftermath. Conversations resumed gradually, though with a noticeably different energy than before. Guests who had witnessed the exchange were carefully guided toward other topics, while photographers and journalists found themselves subtly discouraged from lingering in the area where the confrontation had occurred. The evening's final moments unfolded with careful choreography designed to minimize further drama, while allowing all parties to exit with as much dignity as possible under the circumstances. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation unfolded with the precision of a carefully orchestrated diplomatic response. Within minutes of the necklace being returned to Kate, palace communication staff were already implementing damage control measures that had been refined through decades of managing royal family crises. Sir Clive Alderton, Charles's private secretary, appeared as if from nowhere, moving efficiently between the key witnesses to the evening's dramatic conclusion. His conversations were brief and discreet, but their message was clear. What had just occurred was a private family matter that would be best forgotten by all concerned parties. Lady Pemberton, ever the experienced royal watcher, gathered her husband with a meaningful glance and began their departure without lingering for further socializing. Other senior guests followed suit, understanding instinctively that the evening had reached its natural conclusion despite the relatively early hour. Victoria Hartwell found herself approached by one of the palace press officers, who engaged her in what appeared to be casual conversation, but was clearly designed to gauge her intentions regarding any potential coverage of the incident. The unspoken understanding in such situations was always delicate. Too much pressure would only increase media interest, while too little might allow damaging stories to develop. Quite a successful evening for the charities, the press officer noted casually. The auction results exceeded all expectations. Indeed, Victoria replied carefully, recognizing the subtext. The focus should certainly remain on the wonderful work being supported. Meanwhile, Charles and Camilla had positioned themselves near the museum's main exit, fulfilling their final obligations to thank the event organizers and bid farewell to departing guests. To casual observers, they appeared to be functioning as a united royal couple, but those paying closer attention could detect the tension in their body language and the careful way they avoided looking directly at each other. Kate had returned the necklace to its secure case, which Sophie had discreetly retrieved from their car. The familiar weight of the piece in her hands had provided some comfort, but she remained acutely aware that the evening's events would have consequences far beyond the immediate embarrassment. "Are you all right?" William asked quietly as they prepared for their own departure. "I'm fine," Kate replied, though her voice carried traces of the stress she had been managing throughout the evening. "I just want to get home." The drive back to Kensington Palace took place largely in silence. Both William and Kate lost in their own thoughts about what they had just witnessed and experienced. The London streets passed by outside the car windows, dotted with the usual evening traffic and pedestrians going about their normal lives, completely unaware of the family drama that had just unfolded at one of the year's most prestigious charitable events. "Father was right to address it publicly," William finally said as they neared home. The situation had gone too far. Kate nodded, but she remained troubled by the broader implications. "The last thing any of us needs is for tonight to become fodder for the tabloids. The charities should be the story, not our family dynamics. Alderton will handle the press management," William assured her. "He's dealt with far more challenging situations than this." At Clarence House, the conversation between Charles and Camilla was taking place behind the closed doors of the king's private study. Unlike the public confrontation at the museum, this discussion was conducted in the controlled environment where such sensitive matters were typically addressed. "I truly didn't realize how significant that particular piece was to Catherine," Camilla began, her earlier defensiveness replaced by something approaching genuine remorse. "If I had understood." "But that's exactly the point," Charles interrupted, his voice weary rather than angry now that they were away from public scrutiny. "You didn't ask. You didn't consider that it might have personal significance. You simply saw something you wanted and took it." Charles moved to the window, looking out at the gardens that were barely visible in the evening darkness. The weight of the crown, both literal and metaphorical, seemed heavier than usual as he contemplated the ongoing challenges of managing family relationships within the constraints of public life. "This isn't really about the necklace," he continued. "It's about understanding that belonging to this family requires constant consideration for others, constant awareness of how our actions affect the delicate relationships that hold everything together." Camilla sat quietly in one of the study's leather chairs, her earlier confidence completely deflated. The woman who had survived decades of public criticism and family tensions now appeared smaller somehow, diminished by the realization of how badly she had miscalculated. "I've tried so hard to find my place here," she said quietly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm still the outsider, still trying to prove that I belong." "You do belong," Charles replied, turning back toward her. "But belonging doesn't mean taking what isn't yours. It doesn't mean assuming that your needs or desires should take precedence over established relationships and protocols." The conversation continued for another hour, covering not just the evening's incident, but the broader patterns of behavior that had led to this moment. It was clear that tonight's confrontation had been building for months, perhaps even years, as small irritations and unaddressed issues had accumulated into a larger problem. By the next morning, the first reports about the gala were appearing in the society pages and charity sections of various newspapers. The coverage was overwhelmingly positive, focusing on the significant funds raised for children's charities and featuring photographs of the various royal family members interacting with guests and supporters. Victoria Hartwell's article in her magazine would later be considered a masterpiece of diplomatic journalism. She managed to convey the elegance and success of the evening while including only the most flattering references to the royal attendees. A brief mention of the exquisite jewelry worn by senior royals included a photograph of Kate wearing her emerald earrings, with no reference to any necklace-related incidents. The official palace photographer's images from the evening told a similar story. Careful selection and editing had produced a collection of photographs that emphasized the charitable purpose of the gathering and the gracious participation of the royal family members. Any images that might have captured moments of tension had been quietly excluded from the official release. However, within the smaller circles of royal watchers and society insiders, word of the confrontation began to spread through whispered conversations and discreet phone calls. The details became somewhat embellished with each retelling, but the core facts remained consistent. There had been a public disagreement about jewelry, and Charles had taken an unusually firm stance in defending Catherine's position. These informal discussions would continue for weeks, adding another layer to the ongoing analysis of royal family dynamics that occupied so much attention in certain London circles. The incident became a touchstone for broader conversations about hierarchy, respect, and the challenges of maintaining family harmony under constant public scrutiny. At Kensington Palace, Kate spent the following morning reviewing her schedule for the coming weeks and trying to process the previous evening's events. The necklace sat in its proper place in her jewelry collection, but she found herself wondering when or if she would feel comfortable wearing it again, given the associations it now carried. William had already spoken with his father's office about managing any potential fallout from the incident. The consensus was that unless specific questions arose from media outlets, the matter would be treated as resolved and closed. The royal family's standard approach to such situations was to avoid drawing additional attention through defensive explanations or public statements. The important thing now is to move forward, William had told her over breakfast. Tonight showed that there are clear boundaries, and that those boundaries will be respected. Kate appreciated his support, but she remained concerned about the long-term implications for family relationships. Royal families were expected to present a united front to the public, and any visible cracks in that unity could become sources of ongoing speculation and criticism. 3 days after the gala, she received an unexpected delivery at Kensington Palace. A beautiful arrangement of white roses came with a simple card bearing Camilla's monogram and a handwritten note, with sincere apologies and respect. See, the gesture was appropriate and gracious, striking exactly the right tone for acknowledging the incident without drawing additional attention to it. Kate responded with a brief but warm note thanking her for the flowers and expressing her hope that they could move past the situation. This exchange of notes represented the beginning of what would be a careful rebuilding process between the two women. Neither wanted to allow the necklace incident to create a permanent rift, understanding that such divisions would ultimately harm both their individual effectiveness and the broader interests of the royal family. Charles, for his part, had made it clear to his staff that the matter was closed and that he expected all future jewelry borrowing within the family to follow proper protocols. New procedures were quietly implemented requiring advance approval for any sharing of personal pieces between royal households, preventing similar misunderstandings from occurring in the future. The children's charities that have been the beneficiaries of the gala continued to receive positive attention from their association with the evening, ultimately raising additional funds through follow-up donations from people who had read about the event. In this sense, the evening achieved its primary purpose despite the personal drama that had unfolded among the royal participants. 6 months later, at another major charitable event, Kate chose to wear the disputed necklace for the first time since the gala incident. The piece had lost none of its beauty or elegance, and she felt that enough time had passed to reclaim it fully as her own. The photographs from that evening showed her looking radiant and confident, with the necklace providing exactly the touch of glamour she had always loved about it. Camilla, attending the same event, complimented Kate graciously on her jewelry choice, a gesture that demonstrated how both women had worked to move beyond their earlier conflict. Their relationship would never be deeply personal, but it had developed into something more solid and respectful than before. The incident at the Natural History Museum became one of those royal family stories that lived on in the collective memory of palace staff and royal watchers, serving as a reminder that even the most carefully orchestrated public appearances could be disrupted by very human emotions and conflicts. It also demonstrated that sometimes the most important conversations happen not in private meetings or formal discussions, but in those unguarded moments when genuine feelings finally surface. For Charles, the evening represented a turning point in his approach to managing family relationships as monarch. He had learned that sometimes strong, decisive action was necessary to maintain the respect and harmony that made their complex family structure function effectively. For Kate, it was a reminder that her position within the royal family was secure enough to be defended publicly when necessary, but also that diplomacy and grace would always serve her better than confrontation in managing future challenges. And for Camilla, it became a lesson in the importance of understanding not just the rules and protocols of royal life, but the deeper emotional currents that connected family members to each other and to the traditions they represented. The necklace had been beautiful, but the relationships it represented were far more valuable than any piece of jewelry could ever be.